S09E10. That's all we need.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, Alex, and with me I have Logan. How are you, Logan?
Hey, Alex. Yeah, mate, I'm doing pretty well. As you just kind of mentioned before we went to air, it feels like it's been a long time since we've spoken football. So, yeah, I enjoyed the break. I guess the international break has kept us tied over with some of our own city producing on the reg. So, yeah, it's going to be hopefully what's been a restful break and a good return to the pleasing championship season so far.
Yeah, it feels like it's been a long break. I mean, for those watching along on video, I've actually moved house during the break, so I'll have new surrounds for podcast episodes in the future. But all settled in now, and ready to get back into the championship season. We'll talk about that international break a little bit later on, but it's actually been pretty exciting seeing what Delap and Philogene have managed to do for the England under-21. So. Yeah, we'll certainly talk about that a bit later on. But hey, look, I mean, talking about Philogene, we'll start with the Millwall game and just a terrific display from him against Millwall. I think, we've sort of been seeing flashes of it in the previous games, a couple of assists to his name before this game, but really, you'd almost call it his breakout game for City.
I would even probably go a step further to say that as far as like City football goes, it was probably one of the most impressive patches I think I've seen from a player in a Tiger shirt in quite some time. There was probably a 20-minute period where it kind of coincided with the back end of the first half where he was just unplayable. He was such a joy to watch dribble with the ball, and just watching the defense try and adjust and figure him out was truly a sight. When he's confident and he's running at defenders and getting high up the pitch, I just think that we have found ourselves a remarkable player, and man, he's going to be an exciting one to watch in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it says a lot when the opposition manager effectively subs somebody on just to mark you out of the game, with Norton Cuffy coming on at halftime, and he did have a reasonable impact on Philogene in the second half, but it says a lot about your impact on the game. I guess then talking about the game in general, a 2-2 draw, 1-0 down early on, got back up to 2-1, and really going in at halftime, the Millwall fans booing their players off the pitch. As you said there, Philogene having his way with the Millwall defence, really, and really all the momentum in our favour. And those changes at halftime for Millwall really, I guess, effectively did the trick, and they sort of got the upper hand in that second half. Do you see the game more as 2 points dropped, or do you see it as a decent away performance?
It was such an interesting game to watch as far as momentum shifts go. It kind of felt similar to the Leeds game in many ways, where they were clearly on top before we played ourselves back into it, and then they kind of fell out of the contest really, and we should have gone on with it. But this one was kind of a little bit more interesting in the sense that I thought we were very sloppy at the beginning, and they looked like they were, at least for the first like 10-15, they kind of looked like they were in control. But then we got those 2 goals, and it looked like I know it's a strange thing to say, but at 2-1 at half time, when, as you said, the Den, a fantastic bunch of football fans, booed Millwall off. It really felt like that was going to be an unassailable lead. The confidence that I felt watching it as a fan at halftime, kind of got the feeling that we were going to go on with it and could have won 4 or 5, one. But fair play to Millwall, as you said, they made a tactical adjustment, were able to shut the impact Philogene was having, on them down, and played themselves back into the contest. And realistically, could have probably pinched it towards the end with just the amount of chances that they were creating. And we really did go into our shell in patches in that second half. So, look, in the most long-winded response, I think that realistically it was probably a fair result, just given the huge momentum swings, and they really were huge. So, you walk away with a point. I guess it's concerning that this, walking away with the point has become a little bit of a trend in recent weeks, and that's probably the disappointing aspect as a City fan, that we are already bemoaning some of these fixtures that could have quite easily been 3. But I think in this case we'll take 1 happily, given it could have been, nothing given some of the huge chances that Millwall did create.
Yeah, it's interesting because heading into this game, I think it was 3 away wins in a row. This was to make it 4 in a row, I think, unless it might have been 2, and this would have made it 3. But regardless, you sort of thought you felt like we were coming into this game on the back of some really good away form. But all of a sudden, with this draw, it does make it 1 win in 6 games. And when you sort of look at that, you sort of it sort of creeps up on you a little bit with that form line where you go, okay, yeah, we had the loss to Ipswich, and then there's a couple of draws thrown in there as well. Is there any concern on your part about, I mean, obviously a bright start to the season and perhaps stalling a little bit in recent weeks, or is it more a case of, we've had a few tough opponents and it's it is what it is?
Look, I'm still kind of undecided. I think that what kind of skews the feeling is the fact that Leicester and Ipswich are just on, arguably, well, not arguably, statistically, 2 of the best, starts that we've seen in championship history. And I think because they've jumped out to such a fast lead, it's probably left, a lot to the imagination for those in the chasing pack. One of the teams of which, we ourselves are. I think if they were kind of a little bit more, stuttering or had faltered a few more times and that lead was, 5 or 6 points or less, we probably wouldn't be too concerned. But, there's definitely a bit of a logjam now, as you'd expect this early on in the season. But the fact that those 2 have kind of bolted makes it feel a little bit more frustrating. With that being said, I think we've got to look at the performances, and it's exactly what Rasinha's, been saying, that what we're doing is we're watching a team that, is really looking to control possession and dominate games and trying to be really brave. And, that's a football philosophy. We've said it time and time again. It's what gets preached by the coaching staff, and we have to be kind of willing to, accept that it's not always going to pay off. I, for one, I've seen some pretty negative comments online from City fans. I'm actually really enjoying watching the football at the moment, even though, a couple more results you could probably say have been disappointing, particularly in recent weeks that we have had to settle for 1 point. But overall, I do think we are moving in the right direction. And let's not forget that there's so many players that we haven't really seen that when we did our preseason predictions were, tipped to be like player of the season. And I mean, Harry Vaughan, just the kind of single one out, is a player that we thought we were going to see a lot of, and this was going to kind of be the emergence of him. And he's largely been unsighted, and that's not through any fault of his own. It's just that there's, some players who have come into the squad that are, really making their mark. So look, it's been an interesting start. I'm not too disappointed. I think there's a long way to go, but I do think that it's, heading in a pleasing direction.
Yeah, and as some points of, I guess, context or reassurance for people who, as you say, there might have been a few sort of getting a little bit critical of the squad or the manager. I mean, for one thing, Rasinha's been nominated for Manager of the Month, which I think is a massive display. I think sometimes as a supporter base, you can get caught up in the internal, I suppose, expectations or excitement of the club and become overly critical of what's going on. And then you just need that sort of external perspective to sort of reassure yourself that actually everything is traveling pretty well. Connolly nominated for Goal of the Month, Rasinha nominated for Manager of the Month. They're both a really great reflection of where we are as a club at the moment. And then we had a great chat in the podcast chat last week around where we are and sort of the criticism potentially coming in of the stuttering form, I suppose. And we were talking about it, and so I've just pulled it up. But, from the first 11 games of the season, you sort of compare it to the other 3 promotion seasons. Only the 2 seasons under Bruce, so 15-16 and 12-13, we had 19 points after 11 games. In 07-08 under Brownie, we had 12 points after the 11 games. And this season, we've got 17 points. So we're right up there with those 2 Bruce promotion seasons. And that's not me saying, oh, yeah, we're on track to get promoted necessarily. But it's just me saying it's not as if we've had a terrible start to the season. It's not as if, this is a season like the one under Slutsky or someone like, Adkins or someone like that. Like, this is like a reasonable start to the season. And, we've actually had, I mean, I don't know everyone else's fixture list, but I'd say it's got to be up there as one of the toughest starts to a season when you consider that we've, this weekend will be the 3rd of the 3 relegated clubs in Southampton that will have faced Ipswich as well, that we've already faced, who are up there with Leicester, as you said, having a record-breaking start to the championship season. And then a bunch of other teams as well who are all, Bristol City and Blackburn who are, challenging for the playoffs as well. So it's not as if it's been an easy start. I mean, Sheff Wednesday is probably the only gimme game that we've really had. We haven't played the Rotherhams or QPRs of the league yet. So it's been a really tough start to the season. Those easier fixtures will come, and it's actually been quite a positive start.
Look, the biggest thing to remember with all of this is that there's still 35 fixtures remaining. And I think that we can always get carried away with, dropping points early on in the season. But realistically, if the team is playing in a manner that, looks pleasing and gives us, optimism every single week. And, as we said, we're getting pretty critical when we're just getting finicky and picking on draws. Like if we were coming off a streak of, 3 or 4 losses and we're, in no way, shape or form playing in a manner that kind of gave us optimism or hope, then sure. But that's not what's happening. Even the games that we are getting 1 point in, a lot of the times it's because the frustration that we didn't go on and take 3. And I think that, when you zoom out a little bit and reflect on that, it's a good place to be, or it's a much better place to be. And so for that very reason, I'm sure, Rosie will be interested to get his players back from international break and see really what we can do in the build up to Christmas, because until the turn of the year, you don't really know what's going to happen. Although, I mean, with that being said, if you're a Leicester fan or an Ipswich fan right now, you're pretty hopeful given, the outrageous start that they both have.
Yeah, and I think a really key thing that you just said there is the fact that we've had a lot of draws, not a whole lot of losses. And I think there's a lot of fixation on win percentages and people sort of being a bit critical that perhaps Rossinia's win percentage isn't as strong as it could be. But then you also have to consider that I think he's got, I think I did look it up because of that discussion. I think he's got like the second best loss percentage after this number of games of any City manager. So you think in the sense that, as you say, it's not as if we're on this string of losses, or we're not like we're dropping losses to poor teams or in a bunch of games. We're actually picking up points on quite a regular basis. It's just the fact that, we're coming away disappointed we haven't turned it into a win. And as I said before, I mean, those easier fixtures will come and those wins will start to come with it. But hey, look, you mentioned there as well the international break. So we'll talk about that international break in a second. I'll grab your votes for this game first, though.
Look, I think that it's really hard to go past Philogene for the 3 points purely because of that blistering, 20-minute period. I thought that he just looked likely and really sparked us. I thought he was kind of the momentum swinger in many ways. Like what he was doing on the ball kind of led the rest of us, or the rest of the City squad, to be confident. And I thought that just changed the flow of the game. 2 points for me was Traore. I thought he had his best game in a City shirt. And I guess that it's really hard to put the Leeds miss out of your mind, given how much of a horrendous strike it was. But for a player that was responsible for that, he's bounced back pretty well when you consider that he's been on the score sheet twice since then. And it's the kind of response that you like to see from a player, in that particular situation. And then I think the 1 point for me, I probably give to Alfie Jones. I thought he was, was gallant all game and made a few critical stops late in the game when the momentum kind of swung back in Millwall's favour. So, yeah, that's probably the direction I would have gone with my 3-2-1s.
Yeah, I think we were thinking along similar lines because I've gone, Philogene for the 3 is undisputed. I think, especially that second goal. I think both goals really, really highlighted his pace and the fact that for that second goal, when you put a defender on his ass like that, it's always quite a fun watch. And then playing that ball back for Traore was brilliant. Philogene for the 3. McLaughlin, I gave the 2. I thought he, similar to Jones, I thought was really a really capable centre back for us in the game. His quick through ball or long ball, I guess you'd call it, from the set piece for Philogene's first goal was great thinking and great vision, and I thought that was really good from him. And then Traore I thought was outstanding for the 1 vote, one of his better games for us, and got on the score sheet again. So really making amends from that Leeds miss, which was great to see. But before we move on, actually, I forgot to ask you. I know you had a special call out for the Millwall fans, so I guess they weren't getting in your votes for this game.
Look, it's really interesting that that it's very rare that when you watch a game on on live TV that you get as frustrated by a crowd. But listening to just the sheer noise, I kind of feel like an old man in the sense that there was nothing kind of positive or motivational about it. It reminded me of the World Cup.
I was about to
South Africa,
say
where there was those
the
annoying
vuvuzelas.
vuvuzelas,
Yeah.
and it was just like, I watching it, I was kind of like, do I want to listen to commentary, or am I happy to just put it on mute and purely watch the football? Because this noise is just incredibly uncomfortable and just like largely frustrating. And so I think it speaks volumes that they booed their side off at halftime, when realistically, they scored first and were really tried to kind of put a foothold in the game. It was only that City played remarkable for 20 minutes and got their nose back in front, that to get booed off at halftime when you're 2-1 down, I thought was incredibly rough. But I think there's probably a reason that particular set of fans have got the reputation they do in world football, and I think that this game was just further evidence of they are who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, before we do our player review for this week, I thought we would just touch quickly on that international break. And Philogene, the man in question that we've just been talking about in the Millwall game, looking fantastic on international duty for the England under-21s. And Liam Delap right next to him, coming off the bench against, who was it? It was Ukraine this morning, getting the assist for one of the England goals. And then, of course, in the Slovakia game, Serbia game. Sorry. The other morning, Philogene scoring the 2 goals, Delap scoring a goal and assisting each other. It's, obviously not the senior England level, which we're still yet to see a City player pull on the England shirt. But, the under-21s is sort of the next best thing. And seeing them both performing so well again, alongside, recognised Premier League stars. You've got Harvey Elliott in that midfield, who's playing regularly for Liverpool, and a few others as well. They don't look out of place. And Philogene actually picked up the Man of the Match award for that game against Serbia.
No, they don't look out of place at all. And I think that, this speaks to the recruitment. The fact that, Delap obviously had a, very questionable loan spell at Stoke, I believe. And, it wasn't exactly the most exciting signing by any stretch when it got announced. I know Rosinha had kind of spoken about how hard he chased him and how much value he saw. And, fair play to the gaffer, because he's certainly proven to be, a bright spark in the City, lineup so far. And yeah, Philogene, what more can be said? I still cannot work out how we were able to get him from Villa for the price tag that we did, given the fact that he is a young player. And, I guess I just echo sometimes when a player signs with a different club, listening to the fans of the club that they're leaving from is always a risky one, because sometimes there's some ulterior, motivation behind the feedback. But they were all, from all reports, pretty gutted to lose him. And, I guess that sparked a lot of, insight as to how he would fare, and watching what he's done for us in the first 11 games. And now, in the under-21s, it's remarkable. So certainly glad that both of those, players find themselves playing regularly on Humberside, and I'm really interested to see what they do, obviously, in the next 30 games or so.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, unfortunately, one player that we're not going to see for the foreseeable, due to a hamstring injury, is Regan Slater, who is our player of the week for our player review. He's made 96 appearances for City so far across both a permanent spell and initial loan spell in the League One season, where he joined us in 2021 before joining permanently in January of 22, costing 50 grand from Sheffield United. 8 goals to his name already. He's got the famous chant as well. He's been an absolute steal. I mean, I remember when we signed him on loan, it did feel like it was essentially a depth signing, just to cover it, in midfield in case there were any injuries. He got his go towards the end of the season and really looked a cut above what had been in there to that point in time. And it was great to get him across the line permanently. And I think he's been almost an ever present since then. So it's really reflected, and that's across essentially 3 managers, because I think he initially signed under Grant McCann and then Shotta and now Rosenia. It's a reflection on his quality as a player.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the things that, has impressed me, we can talk so much about the fact that, as you mentioned, he probably was just signed as, a depth signing, or at least appeared to be that, but he certainly didn't get the memo. And, it's very rare that you remember a player by an individual game. I'm just trying to think kind of through the City archives. And I still remember a player like John Bostock, who did absolutely nothing for us, but scored one of the greatest goals, at least from a highlights perspective in our history. Regan Slater was someone that, as you said, didn't necessarily have the accolades, certainly didn't have a price tag, but there was, I think, that performance against Cardiff where, he scored was the two goals. The depth to snatch one of the most unlikely victories. That really stands out to me and kind of, speaks to who he is as a player. Like as a box-to-box midfielder, I would, describe him as someone that, throws himself about, is, incredibly high work rate, but then to also be able to chip in with goals, and just to be able to have, I guess, not only done what he was signed to do, but far, far surpassed, the expectations from probably anyone, except, depending on what he had, is just a, truly remarkable feat. And just watching him, mature as a player, being able to add the goals to his game, and and just shine week in, week out. It's very rare that we ever have discussions on the podcast when we look at, team lineups, whether we'd drop him. As you said, he's part of the furniture, so to speak. And I feel like he's also the type of player that would have to do a lot to be dropped. He sort of plays the same every week. You know exactly what you're going to get from him. And, that role of what Regan Slater does, particularly in this outfit at the moment, is critical. And I think we're going to miss him largely over the next few weeks. It's probably going to be one of those things where you realise how critical he is, not having him for such an extended period.
Yeah, he fills the David Myler / early days Ian Ashby mold of a player that everyone kind of thinks, it's, for City to progress, we've got to ditch these guys. We've got to get better players in. But they always seem to find a way to get back into the side, and they always find a way to keep progressing and keep sort of reaching that level that City wants to get to. And I think that Ipswich game really highlighted what we lose when he's not playing. And I think, the people that sort of say, what does he add? You don't see a lot of what he does because he's not flashy. And you sort of say like he's not flashy. I mean, he's scored the 2 games in a row before his injury. And as you say, I mean, like he's probably best known, or as you sort of led into the commentary on that Cardiff game by saying, there are players that you remember for certain games. And my mind immediately went to that Cardiff game because, he does score the goals. He is a goal scoring midfielder, and he's such an effective player at what he does, that when he's not playing, you do actually notice it. And it'll be interesting because I think as we try to progress as a side, you look at your Scott Twines and your Philogines and your Morton from Liverpool, if we were to sign him permanently, and all those guys come into the team. But I think there's always a place for a Regan Slater in that starting 11 because of what he offers.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think about the other players in like the role. I mean, we've got Greg Doherty, who can kind of do somewhat of a similar role, but we're particularly with how we carry Ozan Tufan, but Tufan is one of those players that is, it's not that he's not fit, but we know that he's more for kind of, I guess, flair, but it's also that he can create things out of nothing. The fact that you've got someone like Slater who can, debatably do his running for him, he's just a very critical piece of the puzzle. And I'm really pleased for him and for us that he's been able to go on and have the career that he's had already. And it looks like such a pleasing story of a player that wasn't necessarily given the props that perhaps were owed to him, but just went out and, as you said, just earned them. And as a result, has really endeared himself, to the City fans.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great signing for City so far. Well, look, we'll move on then, and we'll finish off with a preview of that Southampton game this weekend as championship action resumes. Unfortunately, with the clock changes, it's now a 1 a.m. Yes, it is. It's a 1 a.m. fixture for us these days, so a bit more of a battle to stay awake for this one. But Southampton, managed by Russell Martin now, who took over in the summer following their relegation from the Premier League. They've only got 2 wins in their last 5, so they're actually sitting behind us in the table. I think they lost 3 in a row at one point before getting a win against Leeds to get back on track. I was looking up our record against them, and besides, we beat them 2-1 in the Premier League in the first half of the sort of Mike Phelan, Marco Silva season in the Premier League. But aside from that, we haven't beaten them since March 2008. So it's a really poor record against them. And I remember probably the fixture that springs to mind most against them in recent memory, at least, was under Steve Bruce I want to say it was their first season back in the Premier League. So it might have been our second season in the Premier League when they were potentially still managed by Adkins. It might have been Pochettino managing them when like Lallana and stuff just absolutely tore us to shreds. I think it was like 4-1 or 5-0 or something like that. Is the fixture that most springs to mind about them. But look, they're a dangerous side. They've got some great players, especially their fullbacks in Walker Peters and Ryan Manning. Stewart and Adam Armstrong up top as well as great striker options or midfield option in Stewart's case. So it'll be a tough test. But the 2 wins in 5 games. They play a very similar style to us as well, very possession-heavy side. So it'll be interesting from that perspective in terms of how we sort of tactically match up with them.
Yeah, it will be. And as you said, like an interesting record against them. It doesn't feel like we've played Southampton much, though. They're kind of one of those teams that we've seemed to miss on our faltering and their climb. We have crossed paths, but yeah, it's such an interesting one. A team that's been relegated last year, that's had a little bit of a kind of had to do a forced rebuild, lost some critical players, and at the same time, have got to kind of adjust to life in the championship. I know they started really slow, but it's at 2 wins in their last 5, I think you said, and they're only just behind us. So look, with that in mind, it scares me because it's one of those teams that as you do adjust to the championship, you still have that Premier League mentality, perhaps, where you are, playing for something, and you would still certainly see yourself as a big club. So they do have a lot to prove, it's going to be an intriguing battle to see how everyone returns from international and how we bounce international break, and to see how we bounce back from wasn't even a defeat, but it feels like this this patch of form of draws creeping in, and I guess the disappointing loss to Ipswich. 3 points would be huge, but it won't come easy.
Yeah, no doubt. And look, they'll be looking to have used that international break to sort of regather themselves and sort of launch again under Martin. And another couple of weeks under him and learning his style of play will have helped them, no doubt, as well. I was sort of thinking about it. I mean, I don't know if a whole lot of our players actually went away for the international break. So hopefully that does mean that amongst a bit of recovery and rest, there's also a chance to also embed a bit more of the style and tactical displays that Rossini wants to get into the players, particularly the new signings. So there's every chance as well that we can come out of the international break quite strong as well. And you sort of hope, fingers crossed. I don't know if there's been any word on Tufan yet. You mentioned him a bit earlier, but I know he was in a sort of a battle of to get fit for this game, whether we'd see him back, because he's one that you can easily forget about when you look at sort of the form table for us and think, that early season form and the displays from him against sides like Sheff Wednesday really sort of set the league alight. And if we can get him back in the team, that adds a completely different dimension to the side as well.
Well, let's not forget he got the Championship Player of the Month, to begin proceedings. So it speaks to just the quality that he does have. And I guess the only other thing that is worth mentioning is we need to wait and see how Connolly is, because I know that he didn't. He was, I believe it was precautionary, but he didn't end up playing for Ireland as well. So certainly something to watch, because the form he's been in, although one would argue that the last couple of performances haven't been his best, but before that, we had a flying start.
Yeah, and you'd say, I guess, Delap over the international break has certainly proven himself to be a man full of confidence as well.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so in terms of, I guess, score prediction for this one or result, or how are you leaning in this one?
Look, I want to be positive, but I feel like there's some real unknowns with this one. It's just it's a fascinating matchup. I want to stay positive. I feel like we're probably gonna lean towards a draw in this one. It's just whether it's 1-1 or 2-2 is kind of the unknown. I'm going to say 1-1, and I feel like that's a painfully boring fixture. I'd really hate to see a 1-1. I'd love to see a City result, but I think that's probably where I'd put my money.
Yeah, I'm leaning a 1-1 as well. Maybe a 2-1 loss. I can definitely see us getting on the score sheet, and I hope that we could make it, I guess, sort of 3 from 3 against the relegated clubs in terms of not losing the game. But yeah, look, I mean, City could surprise us. I think, like, you look at that Leicester game and you think, like, we do have that ability to show up against these sides. And I'm actually really interested to see how we go against a side that's playing in a very similar manner to us. It's that sort of steady progression and possession heavy side. Might give us that opportunity to get someone like a Philogene in over the back and getting goals. And talking about Delap being full of confidence, Philogene no doubt will be full of confidence as well. So I could see Philogene getting another goal in this game. And, maybe we can manage a 1-0 sort of shutout like we did against Leicester. I guess, the final thing was in terms of the lineup. I'm sort of trying to cast my mind back to that Millwall game, and you sort of think maybe a Scott Twine's the one most under threat in that starting 11. Maybe, whether we if Coyle's fully fit, whether he comes back into the starting lineup and we shift Graves back to centre back, I'm not too sure. It is an interesting point as well that we didn't really touch on in the Millwall game, but it's another game where we had Vinagre and Furlong on the bench as recognised left backs, and we started Graves at left back. So I don't know whether Rosenia persists with that as well.
Yeah, look, that's right, and I think what is probably going to be the most intriguing aspect of that is how we do cover Slater, and that does speak into whether Tufan will be fit, and yeah, that wing back dilemma is a really interesting one. I think that in the off season, Vinagre was probably the signing that we got almost the most excited about, and as we sit here and talk 11 rounds in, he certainly. He's probably the signing. Well, actually, I say that, but Scott Twine is probably the most disappointing signing so far, as expectations might have gone. But
yeah,
both of those players do have a lot to prove. But the one thing that I would say is they are proven quality. So just because they haven't necessarily performed so far, I wouldn't be ruling them out just yet. So. Yeah, lots of variables in this one to kind of weigh up to see how the team will line up. But yeah, it's pretty hard to say. Yes, I do think that you kind of touched on it. I do think if Delap is back and is fit, I think we'd likely see him start anyway, just given the form and I guess momentum that he seems to have got with his trip to play for England.
Yeah, no doubt. So look, it'll be an interesting game. Hopefully it's one that we can pull out the 3 points and sort of set a positive step after the international break, and be one that we're looking forward to watching on Saturday night. But look, thank you for joining me for this one, Logan.
Yeah, good to be here, Alex.
No worries. And thanks everyone for listening in. It's been another episode of the Tigers Down Under, and we'll be back this time next week to chat everything City. But until then, come on, City.